molecule shown below. Circle the unstable region in this molecule and show which bond is most likely to break. Explain why that part of the molecule is unstable and by what chemical mechanism the bond is broken. How does ATP store energy, and how does ATP power energy requiring reactions? So it's a big question there. So break it up into different parts. When you have the students read the questions, stop them at certain points and do those particular discussions at those times. Okay? So the first break could be with the actual molecule, and I highly suggest that you have this drawn already on the board before you actually start the actual part of the discussion. Now, so label the three components of the ATP. Here we have the phosphate groups, the phosphates. Here we have the pentose sugar, and here we have adenine. So the structure should generally look familiar. Here we have the phosphate groups, here we have a pentose sugar, adenine. ATP is derived basically from the macromolecule nucleic acid, similar to what we have DNA and RNA, just not our typical, as far as what we think of as a nucleic acid. But the structure is there, the pentose sugar, the nitrogenous base, and the phosphate groups. Now, being that here we have three phosphate groups attached, the main component here is the fact that we have these negatively charged phosphate groups. Because of these negatively charged phosphate groups, you have these repelling charges, light charges. So they want to get away from each other as quickly as possible. So any little molecule that can come by is easily phosphorylated because of this interaction between these three phosphate groups. Because of the highly negative charge on each one, it wants to break apart. Now, circle the unstable region. So of course, the unstable region would essentially be the phosphate groups. Now, the most unstable would essentially be the bond right there. That's the most unstable. Okay, it's the most unstable bond out of the three. Okay, now, and that's where most likely we have the first break. So if we, the entire molecule, of course, is ATP. Adenosine triphosphate. If we were to break this bond, okay, so get rid of this first phosphate group, then we would convert ATP into ADP, okay, adenosine diphosphate, and what would have broken off essentially would be an inorganic phosphate group, okay? Now, we can break off this second bond here, okay, which is also relatively unstable, to give us adenosine monophosphate, AMP, okay, plus two inorganic phosphate groups, okay, pyrophosphate, when they're linked together. Now, each one of these play a very important role as far as different mechanisms that occur in the cell, all of which, again, link the basic concept of cell structures, cell function, cell communication, and the concepts of energy and metabolism together through the use of these molecules, okay? ATP, the currency of the cell. Now, the energy that is released is kept in these very unstable bonds. Okay, it is kept within the bonds, not within the oxygen, not within the phosphate, not within the phosphorus. It is kept within these unstable bonds. Once these bonds are broken, that is when the energy is released. Okay? Now, you have the recycling of ATP by having the conversion of ADP into ATP by adding the phosphate group. Okay? And So if you look at figure 6.6 in the book actually shows the ATP molecule. Figure 6.7 shows the actual cycle of ATP. Okay? So with the addition of the water molecule to the ADP, you would end up actually making the bond between the ADP and the inorganic phosphate group to give us the ATP molecule. Okay? To break the bonds, you would have to take away the water molecule. Okay? Hydrolysis reaction and dehydration synthesis respectively, and that applies to all of the macromolecules. And that's basically the chemical mechanism that helps break and make the bonds. I already explained how ATP stores the energy, and as far as how does ATP power energy requiring reactions, so as far as the actual reactions that go on in the cell, they're for the most part endergonic, okay, which require the intake of energy. Now, overall, though, the process is exergonic because the majority of the endergonic, the little endergonic reactions that occur in the cell, you have more energy being released through the use of the ATP molecule and the breaking of these bonds between the phosphate groups. You have a greater amount of energy released there than you require with the endergonic reactions. So there's an excess amount of energy coming from the ATP molecule, so you actually end up making an exergonic reaction in the end. And essentially that's the reasoning behind why ATP is actually able to power these reactions, okay, because of essentially that excess amount of energy that is released in relation to the amount of energy that's required to power the individual endergonic reactions that occur in the cell. Okay? Again, remember to draw this at the beginning of the discussion. So in that 10 to 12 minute period where you have the students working on the workshop, you can draw this on the board. That way you have it ready and you don't waste time. Okay? And that was number 4.